Hey everyone, welcome back to Field Stories. I am Chris and joined by Michela this week. How you doing, Michela?
Good. Hello, hello.
Oh yeah, and well, it's only the two of us, so it's my job to do the intro this time because Nick's not with us. Nick is in Suriname, living the life, probably taking photos of. He's got his camera in one hand and anaconda in the other. Just in the zoo that is Suriname, the alternate reality of Suriname. That's what he's.
Sound good.
So yeah. Right.
Sorry.
You, you okay? Well, you all right?
No.
No? Okay, well, that's, yeah, fair enough, fair enough. Is
Yeah,
this like, maybe we'll answer why you're laughing in Field Stories After Dark, but
probably.
yeah, okay. But yeah, so I guess we should address where we are, what we're doing, how we're doing. So where are you, Michaela? How you doing? What are you doing? Other than that, what are you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing, man, I'm getting close to wrapping up like the end of summer field season. Just, trying not to burn out too bad. Got home really late last night, doing a riparian survey and found three ticks climbing up my wall last night, and this morning was so great. Always love that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, just it was good though. I'm doing a pilot study of this project that I am proposing right now, and kind of running through it, and nipping the odd and ends, and kind of just fine tuning it, and feeling really good about it. Hoping to eventually kind of publish it and then present it at conferences, and hopefully I'll talk about it later once I truly fine tune it. But I'm feeling really good about it right now, so that's been good. But how about you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, same old, here kicking away in the jungle in Peru. We're about halfway through this research period, which ends at the end of August. So we're just past the halfway mark. And we actually been dealing with, like today it's hot, it's like 30 plus Celsius, and
Yeah.
it's again, but we've had this crazy friaje. People don't know what that is. It's a cold front that comes from the south over the Amazon in our area specifically.
Mm.
It's kind of a local phenomenon. And it gets cold. Like it gets down to like 10, 11 Celsius, which, people laugh because they're like, that's not cold. But honestly, it is freezing here. You are shivering. You see your
Yeah.
We found a bird dead on the ground recently, just dying because of the cold. Like it's so cold I can't even do bird ringing or bird banding because it's too stressful for them. I mean, it's really cold and it's sort of natural, but this one lasted a long time, 10 days. And it's been really rough. So we're back to the heat now, which maybe the viewers know I don't love the heat sometimes, but
Mm.
it's better for the wildlife, so that's
Right.
good. So yeah, otherwise just kicking along, being busy as always.
That's crazy.
And
We just got a huge heat wave too, like during that time, like 10 days of just like intense heat too.
yeah,
That's wild.
crazy. I mean, the weather patterns are, well, yeah, they're just unstable.
Abnormal.
But
Hmm.
but yeah, I guess we should also, if we could just address the viewers. I mean, obviously our show has been a little bit up and down on episodes, at least recently, for anybody's listening in this one. And yeah, it's been a real challenge for the three of us, including Nick, to find time to like make it work, And
Hmm.
we've come to some internal plans about how we can make this work and try to keep the episodes rolling. And that means a bit more flexibility about, when we have guests and when we have hosts. So sometimes it might just be one of us, sometimes it might be all three of us. But we're going to try to make it work. So we have this content coming. And, I think those of you listening to this episode, listening for a reason. So you probably enjoyed the content, and we're going to try to keep going. And we got a new member of the team, Ellis, who isn't on the show, but he's been awesome with editing and doing all the stuff that we don't have time for. So yeah, we're rolling. We're still growing. And for everyone listening, thanks again for sticking with us. And yeah, we're just going to get bigger and better, hopefully. So with that out of the way, exactly. There you go. Yeah. So with that out of the way,
The
yeah.
heart. I
Yes.
think I did that right. This is the
Yeah,
Gen Z heart. Wait, no, it's this one.
that
Love,
looks better. That looks better.
love
There you
you
go.
all.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. It's so cute. It looks like like a 7-year-old's cookie,
I
kind of bent.
know, it's like sad and crippled.
Nice. Yeah. Um, for those listening, Michaela made a off-center kind
I
of
made a
crooked.
Gen Z heart for you, Gen Zers.
I'm not trying to.
I'm on the
Yeah.
cusp.
Yeah. 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 So, all right. So this week we have a really cool guest. Andy Whitworth is his name, and yeah, I ran into him a few years ago working here in Peru, and but I followed him on obviously Instagram, but also some of the publications and work he's been doing, and really well known and respected neotropical ecologist and conservationist, and works for manages Osa Conservation. And yeah, I'm really excited to chat with him today and see what he has to say about his work, and also to see what his story is going to be. So I guess without further ado, vamos, let's go.
Vamos.
All right, everyone, thanks for joining us. And our guest today is Andy Whitworth, and he is the Director of Conservation for Osa Conservation. And Andy and me have sort of crossed paths once a few years ago in Manu Biostation, and I certainly know his name from the work he's been doing over the years across the Neotropics, and also following him on Instagram, social media, and the amazing work him and his organization are doing. It's a real pleasure for us to have you, Andy. Thanks for joining us. I know how crazy everyone's schedule is, and thanks for taking time out of a Saturday afternoon up in Costa Rica. I believe you're in Costa Rica to chat with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks to you guys for having me.
Awesome. So Andy, if you want to maybe give our viewers and listeners a bit of a background about yourself, just introduce your history, what you're doing now. Just a bit of background, and then we can kind of hit it from there. That'd be great.
Yeah, so my current day today as the director at Osa Conservation involves, a certain amount of fundraising. We're an organization with about 87 staff members right now, so it's a big group, big team. We operate a couple of field stations and have a team of biologists on site, people working in communities. But my background really is as a field ecologist, and that's where we met down in Peru, in the Amazon. And I did my my graduate research for my PhD down there, and that's where I kind of cut my teeth in the field.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So, maybe for those of us who have heard about, the Osa Peninsula and Costa Rica and that kind of thing, maybe you can give us a little more information about some of the work that Osa Conservation is doing, both in Costa Rica and Peru, and maybe, across the different areas that your organization's working. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. We work in the Southern Pacific in Costa Rica, and so the Osa Peninsula, is incredibly unique, just in terms of endemicity and how many unique species that can't be found anywhere else, on Earth, in this little region. But what I'm kind of interested in is this idea of how we're going to get as many species through a climate bottleneck as possible. With a quickly shifting climate. So our current national parks aren't going to really work if species are moving. So we're kind of focused on building a climate resilient corridor in the Southern Pacific. So thinking not just about Osa's lowlands, but Osa's lowlands and how well that's connected to the mountains where the Amistad Peace Park is. So a lot of the work that we're doing is actually outside of the national parks and within those corridors between the protected areas. So working a lot with communities to restore habitat. Some of that's mangrove habitat over near the Torraba del Sierpe wetlands, but a lot of it is a lot of native forest restoration. So there's a big break between the lowlands and the highlands in terms of cattle farms, and forest has been really degraded. So we're trying to work with our local communities to kind of increase the forest cover and improve functional connectivity for the wildlife and the species. And that's kind of the big vision of what we're doing. When I think down to where you guys are working or where you're working, Chris, in Peru, it's a similar thing in that Western Amazon region, is how we build these big climate resilient landscapes where you've got the lowland Amazon connected right up to the Andes. And that's what we're seeing is species already starting to move their distributions upslope.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I actually wanted to follow up on that sort of theme about climate change because, so many people understandably put a lot of focus on the North Arctic. And I think the changes, for me, I'm from Canada and you grew up on the northern part of England as well. So, it's understandable why there'd be focus there. There's a lot of people and sometimes these changes are really drastic and intense, like Where I grew up in Ontario, we've lost 2 to 3 months of snowpack every year now, just since I was young to where I'm now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very visceral and visual. But also, my time here, again, it's 6 years. I haven't had 10, 15 years like you have in the tropics, but for my 6 years, I've definitely seen what I see to be some changes. And certainly what I've seen too is how incredibly, responsive the forest is to climate change and droughts and extreme heat. And I guess I'm wondering, with your experience and your experience working in many different regions, if you could maybe elaborate on that and maybe give some more, what you've seen, what you see coming as well about that subject.
Yeah. I think touching on what you said is, we hear a lot about the tropics is about deforestation and habitat change, because that is a major, like, imminent driver that we see right now, like the gold mining and those big visible things.
Yeah.
But the climate is shifting in the tropics. I felt it through how extreme events are, and the more unpredictability, right, in weather events. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Here in Osa, we had 2 really dry, wet seasons, and you can see it's affecting the big trees. A lot of them are probably dying because, in these tropical forests, the root systems run very shallow. They're along the surface. So if your water table depletes, they're affected very quickly by drought in wet forest regions. And we're getting more extreme droughts and more extreme wet seasons.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely.
Yeah. Just to tag on to this as well, because this kind of adds on to my work with what we're seeing with our species. What are you seeing with invasives? With climate change, obviously we're seeing a lot of invasive dominating and becoming a lot more resilient. You're just seeing invasives that are just really adapting to warming climates. And so in areas that I'm working in, we're just seeing invasives just really over-dominating these areas, and a lot of our native species are really withering away. And so these areas are becoming so over-covered with these invasives and becoming almost a monoculture, and they're losing that heterogeneity. And so obviously we're seeing like over forecasts of just really these monocultures of almost like poison ivy or a multiflora rose or greenbrier. So I'm curious to see what's kind of happening over in areas like that, and how are you guys managing that? Are there, managing or any type of herbicide? What is it, like over there in the tropics?
Well, I honestly, when I was down in the Amazon, I didn't see a lot in relation to invasives, except around the river systems more, where you've got this kind of open habitat and things can move. Like there's some ground covers that they brought in, like nitrogen fixing ground covers, like a kudzu type thing, and that started to move through the river systems, and obviously it moves very quickly when you're in those kind of areas. Interior forest, I haven't seen too many non-natives, except for maybe like Africanized bees are obviously moving through. And then here in Costa Rica, one thing I did see was up in the mountains, there's a botanical garden that actually brought, the guy brought in a bunch of stuff from all over the world. And one ginger just became very aggressive. It went out into the understory, and basically it's strangling everything up in the highlands.
Yeah, it's like our kudzu over here. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of, I would agree, Andy, from what I've seen, that's kind of my impression too, is that if you have nice primary forest, it's pretty resilient.
Great.
What we do, what I, for example, see literally out the window in this area is like recently we've seen a whole bunch of like crested caracara in our forest, which if you know the distribution, they really aren't here much at all. And a whole bunch of other species, like we had a barn owl the other night. And normally in around the forest, you don't really hear them. These are just species that are like locally, I don't know if invasive is the right term, but they're moving in. They're coming from our areas in Bolivia or Brazil, coming from farmland areas in Brazil. And to me, it's not as big a problem as like a continental invasive, but it's an indication of deforestation in our area. It's interesting to know that it seems like the Amazon and I guess the Neotropics seem to be somewhat more resilient, because I know in my, granted, limited experience, but in Africa and Uganda, I was shocked to find so many invasive species being a major problem there. So it's obviously not only like tropics are not all resilient to it, but I suppose that the diversity of life here in the Amazon is strong enough that when it's healthy and intact, it's able to sort of outcompete in them for the most part, at least in the lowlands. I mean, obviously we have a lot of problems with fungus and other issues in the higher lands, but, but yeah, no, it's a good question though. It's very, obviously a super important topic. I wanted to ask you, Andy, and this is maybe a personal question because I haven't really worked in Costa Rica. I've been there once, but I've never gotten a chance, unfortunately, to really work there, live there. Yeah, so I mean, Costa Rica is kind of viewed, I think, somewhat understandably as kind of the gold standard for ecotourism and conservation and putting, nature, first, so to speak, publicly as a country. And I guess from your perspective, I'm not expecting you to like be really negative about a country, but also I'm curious what the reality for conservation on the ground is. What's your thought as an ecologist who really understands things, while still understanding you don't want to maybe piss people off, but what's your honest thought about that? Because I mean, I don't work there, and I know we all know on the ground is somewhat different than the public persona in many cases. So I'm curious about your insights into that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it that Costa Rica's done a fantastic job at its green marketing. And I think it's like, a lot of places in the world, I think there's some really great things that have happened and there's still a lot of challenges. There's some things that, not so great. And I would say 30, 40 years ago, the country was extremely pioneering because they had to do something because forest cover was down to less than 20%, or around 20%, from, around 80%, around the turn of the century, the turn of the last century. So they didn't, have anywhere to go really, but they did take a really brave investment in thinking about building a tourism economy, and they turned around that forest cover loss from one of the highest rates in the world to actually increase their forest cover to over 52% today. So that's a massive turnaround, and still managed to show a growing GDP, and a better general average lifestyle for its populace. And I think that's what's been pretty unique about things. But from an ecologist position, they still lost species going through that shift. I mean, they pretty much lost harpy eagles and giant anteaters and some of the big apex species like jaguars and white-lipped peccaries. They're kind of in these pockets of places around the country, and that's one of the biggest concerns from my point of view now, is that some of those species, without better habitat connectivity and maybe some kind of positive action, could easily go extinct or be extirpated in some areas. So like the peninsula here, for example, we've been working with some researchers in the US and locally here in Costa Rica, and we haven't published this yet, but there could be as few as 20 to 30 jaguars in the whole of the peninsula. It's extremely in a fragile position, I would say. And part of that is because they're really restricted to, white-lipped peccaries are really a prime food base. Yeah. And although we've seen an expansion through our research of most species in recovery, one of them that hasn't expanded very well is the white-lips. And Piedras Blancas National Park, for example, hasn't had white-lipped peccaries in there for 40 years. And so I'd really want to see the country take a positive step in sort of doing some hands-on kind of management, like groups have done in Argentina and Europe with rewilding, and say, okay, we can't just sit and cross our fingers and hope that everything will return passively, and there needs to be a bit more of an active management with some things. So, I think it's like good and bad, and the good thing is that Costa Rica wants to be seen as a leader, and so you can kind of leverage some of these projects and do things. And they're at a different stage in their conservation journey, I would say, than countries like Peru that are still going through maybe rampant resource extraction.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
no, that's really interesting. Thank you. It's great to have that insight. I guess I had, well, I could talk to you all day about white-lipped peccaries because that's an interesting species, but that's very niche, so we'll keep that. But one day over a beer, maybe. But anyways, I wanted to ask you another question, which comes up to me all the time. I work with herps, reptiles, amphibians, and I think anybody knows that in general, the abundance of particularly snakes and frogs in Costa Rica compared to the lowlands in Peru is often pretty insane. Like, 5, 10, 15 snakes and a long night walk in Costa Rica is like, yeah, quite doable. In Peru, in most places, that would be legendary if you had that kind of luck. And I have a whole bunch of theories, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that are. I mean, it's probably way too complicated to answer in the next couple minutes, but I'm just curious what your thoughts, if there's some summary answer you've ever come up with for that.
Well, I think a lot of it is to do with productivity of a system.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to think more in terms of like energy flow.
Yeah.
I suppose is just it's, and you can kind of see that in the Amazon itself. Like if you go out in the Western Amazon versus the Eastern Amazon, the
Yeah.
productivity is so much greater in the Western
Yeah.
Amazon. So you've just
Yeah.
got a greater biomass of wildlife in general.
Mm-hmm.
And Osa is a very, it's not as species diverse as the
Mm-hmm.
Amazon. We don't have the
Yeah.
same numbers of species, but like you said, there's an intense abundance of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're right. Like anolis lizards here, it's phenomenal. Like you can't walk 5 paces without seeing an anole, and it's a kind of like rarer
Yeah.
thing to see in Peru, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with fertilizers.
Yeah.
Fertilizers are all over this place and quite rare
Yeah,
in
no,
Peru.
it's true. No, it's so interesting. I mean, because yeah, like we've had this just quick example for listeners. Like we've had our current field stint here started June 1st, going through to today, and at the moment we found I think 2 venomous snakes in over 6 weeks. Whereas the interesting thing in Costa Rica, you'd probably find 2 in one night or more.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is that when I did some work recently in Soctapata, which you may have heard of this, Andy. It's up in the around 800 to
Mm-hmm.
2,000 meters site. Yeah. We found way more venomous snakes in that site than the lowlands. So I think you're right. I think that obviously productivity, fertility, yeah, how energy flows is the reason. I guess it's always of wonder, so like why, like why is the soil or the area more productive in Costa Rica? That's the fundamental question that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a geologist. I don't know. I'm curious if you would have anything to elucidate on that.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it there. It's to do with it's probably to do with it's a geological and a sediment question. So
Yeah.
in Yamis, you'll see that gradient, right, about how much sediment is coming off the mountains, and it gets deposited very quickly in the foothills and in the slopes, and then it kind of dissipates. And so I just think you get these really rich, abundant areas, especially in those foothills.
Yeah, I guess next episode we'll have to get a geologist on field stories. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions, but one, this may be more geared towards maybe our younger viewers, but obviously you have a lot of younger viewers and younger scientists that I feel a lot of people really want to go and work abroad, right? You have a lot of people who want to go and work in South America, specifically Costa Rica. I remember seeing a lot of that on a lot of wildlife network pages. And to see a couple of our hosts and guests that are working in areas such as Costa Rica and Peru, what would you, suggest, advice-wise for these viewers of how to kind of get in a position like yours? And then, to kind of tag along to that, what does the government kind of think about, what you guys do? And, do they support it? Do they, give any funding, such as, the government does give us an allotment of funds? Is that even kind of a thing in Costa Rica, or is it mostly NGOs, funded groups out there? So I'm just kind of curious,
Yeah, well, to touch on that last part, that's one thing that the government did really well here. They basically pioneered the payment for ecosystem services. So they were one of the first countries in the world to do that. So not just organizations like ours, but any kind of landowner a private landowner, if they want to protect some forest or maybe start an agroforestry system, they can get payments basically to do that. So yeah, we get some government support, some contracts for pockets of land that we protect, which is very cool. What I would say is that it's pretty small amounts, and it helps to pay for rangers and basic patrols. But a lot of the science and the field work and those add-ons, really, that's through philanthropy money.
Right.
But most of that is coming from from groups in the US and Europe. Yeah.
Cool. And then in terms of any maybe just a quick little bit of it, it's so complicated, but to build on Michela's question, any advice for someone who's young? I know it's open. It's a big question.
It's a big question. Yeah.
But well, we all have little things that have popped up in our lives that we maybe think that are important. So anything you could share is always good for our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to put yourself in a position where you can you just get out there and experience it, right? And there are plenty of groups like and Chris, I know like you run plenty of field projects and expeditions that are open for people to get involved in, and you've just got to give it a try and see how you adapt and do. The field is these kind of remote field things are not for everybody, and for some people it's like a fun experience for a few weeks, and then maybe not for your whole life, like weirdos like us. But then other people are just going to like thrive in it. So you've just got to give it a go and try it. Costa Rica is a great place. I'd say the beauty of Osa is I can hang around here in shorts and t-shirt and not get eaten alive by mosquitoes, and generally not pick up too many tropical diseases. Peru's a bit more intense. So I always say, like, really young students, like Costa Rican rainforest is a kind of nice entry level. And then when you want to, if that's okay and you want to ramp it up a little bit, then Peru's the place.
That's good. I like that. And we have a lot to do that. Trust me. That's true. No, that's really good.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Well, I think we're ready to move on to the story time. Again, I suspect you have many, many stories ranging from crazy to funny to inspiring, but go ahead and try and hit us with one, man. Anything you want to share would be great to get it on the show today.
Man, it's a bit rough. It's hard to choose, out of 15 years of stories. Which one? Look, I think like I could choose a bunch. I remember being, well, I'll just quickly one, but I'll tell you a bit more about Zero, I think. But I remember like just one stupid moment was down in Madridios trying to catch my first, big, it sounds a bit stupid, but a big adult dwarf caiman. They're not that big, right? But they're pretty nice.
My favorite species, I know.
Yeah. Well, my hand ended up inside of its mouth, and it dragged me under the water. And I don't know if you can see it, but I've got scars all across my fingers.
Oh yeah, I love this story. Sorry.
This was a rough one. I couldn't help myself. We were starting a 3-week long expedition to put up camera traps in the canopy. So I was the tree climber, and we'd got to this indigenous community in Manu, and we went out just for a little exploration at nighttime. This big beautiful Trigonatus is sitting there in this deep pool, and I'd only ever seen little ones at this point, like tiny babies, and I just couldn't help myself. So I jumped in and I kind of grabbed it, and I was expecting an explosion, and it didn't really do anything. And I was like, oh, this is pretty easy. So I'd like moved it over to the bank, and I was about to like lift it out and pass it to a couple of the folks that I was with, and it just exploded. The power was unreal, and the scoots on it are so sharp.
Oh no!
Horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a mess. So my left hand was inside of its mouth, and I'm like trying to hit it to get it to open its mouth with the right hand, and it bit me down here.
Oh.
And eventually, like, I don't know, it came out and my hand came free and I grabbed it again and we got it out. But then I realized, I look and you could see the bones in my fingers on my left hand. It was just
Yep.
mangled.
Yep.
It was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And took a couple of photos and but then got back and had to clean it up with TCP and I was like in tears. And then the next day my hand's just in a bandage and I'm supposed to be climbing 50 trees over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I think the first day or two I had to send a student that was with us who'd never climbed a tree before and start sending her up these like 50-meter trees. So it was. She had a good experience out of it.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
But it was.
Oh
it was,
my God. That's,
it was a couple of days. It was a couple of days till I could climb. But the worst thing was, right, so the whole 3 weeks, most of it was healing up, but this finger swelled up into like a golf ball. I didn't know what was going on. I got back to Cusco and I got a scalpel and cut it, and this pus oozed out, and a bit of caiman tooth popped out onto the table after a month of being in there.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Wow. Okay.
Oh, wow.
That's horrible but awesome. It's a great story. I mean, that tops mine. I got my wrist like ripped right open by one, and but yeah, didn't quite get to the bone. I didn't nick an artery and my tendons were okay, but it peeled it right back. That was my run-in with my favorite species. So I love them. I got one on my arm tattooed. I love them so much. So this story is like hitting me perfect. Mm-hmm. I love it.
They're so it's so easy to make a mistake with them because like for size, power ratio compared to say a black caiman, there's no comparison. That thing
and
is
the personality. They're so aggressive. They're dragons. They're honestly dragons. Most people I know who've worked with the 3 caiman species in the Neotropics, or the 4, love palpebrosus, love Paleosuchus. They love them because they're dragons. They're honestly. So
I've always felt grateful though that it didn't roll. I was so lucky that it
rolled me 3 times. It rolled me 3 times. So I had it. This is really, again, stupid, right? Both of us, it happens. I caught it facing me, really dumb. So I pulled it. It was like a 1.3 meters. I pulled it up. I caught it, but then it just grabbed my wrist, and I'm like, what the hell do I do? It's got me. And then it 3 times death rolled, and it's peeling the skin each time, even though I'm holding it. And I'm like, what the hell do I do? If I let it go, it's going to rip the skin right off. So I'm just waiting, and it probably was 10 seconds, but it felt like 2 minutes. And the blood's just pooling in its mouth, and I'm watching this. And then finally she let go, and I just dropped her. But just like you, I had a volunteer who had just started her master's thesis on caimans. I had to catch them for her. And I was like so upset because I said to her, like, I'm sorry, your project.
Oh,
anyways,
no.
And I was catching caimans in a week. But it was right during the pandemic. I couldn't even go to the hospital. I had to just do duct tape and stay in the field. So yeah, caimans. That's a great story, man. You hit it out of the park in that one. I love it. That is awesome. Very good. Perfect. Damn.
Oh, herpers.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, dude. I really appreciate it. This is great. I feel like, again, definitely could talk a lot more about a lot of things. Really enjoyed it. Probably going to wrap it up now for all of us and for the viewers to move on. But yeah, hopefully we can have you on again in the future. Maybe even we can do an in-person episode one day. If you're in Peru, we can catch up. I know you got really cool projects on the go here as well with bears and other things. So yeah, hopefully we can catch up again in the future. Really appreciate it.
We've got a couple of bears with collars on, and we just our team's down there now. We've got a couple of jaguars and pumas and a bunch of ocelots, and we just actually got our first collar back from a shorted dog.
Wow!
Last week. That's a crazy story. We collared this dog, and about 2 months ago, beautiful little female. I mean, it must have been around a year old. She's so stunning. And then it's pretty sad, really. Like, we got a mortality alert, and it looks like she was killed by maybe a puma or a jaguar. And so her jawbones were just sitting there next to the collar. But some pretty, I mean, we got some pretty interesting data. But
yeah, that's awesome.
I'll be back down next year at some point.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I'd love to have you on again, man. And let's keep off the show as well, and hopefully we'll cross paths for sure. Really appreciate again you taking the time. It was awesome. really interesting conversation.
Come and check out Costa Rica, Chris, and come down to Osa when you got some time.
I know, I need to. I will, absolutely. So thanks again, man. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, ciao.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, Andy was great. I mean, I'm really happy we had him on the show. Really interesting. I mean, again, we have these guests on that are, really connected and really knowledgeable, and it's, I don't know, I find it super fun. The only thing I ever feel sad about is I just wish I could keep talking to them about all these questions. I want to ask them about white-lipped peccaries because they're such an important animal anywhere they're native. Like they're so fundamentally important to the structure of the forest in ways that many people who've never been here or don't know the species would never understand. And they, similar to what he said about the park he mentioned, it's sort of similar to in our area that we don't have them really here at the moment. And there's a lot of questions and uncertainty why. And so anyways, not to get in a peccary rabbit hole, but it's really cool. Really enjoyed it, and really interesting, thoughts on Costa Rica and obviously projects. So and the story, well, I love the story. So he was.
I loved it too. Absolutely. No, I think he was great. I had a lot more that I was kind of brewing in the back of my mind too. I kind of wanted to ask him about some amphibian and reptile diseases and what he, about. There's been a lot of papers that have been coming out about things that have been brewing, and especially in South America, and how that's been kind of transferring over in North America too. And so I'm sure we could have talked a lot about that. And but yeah, I thought he was great, and yeah, we could have definitely continued to talk more and more. But yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah, awesome, really interesting. So yeah, I guess that's about it. We might as well wrap her up, and we'll see where we go next week. But like we've been talking about, we're gonna try to get back on the road here with having episodes regularly for everyone who's sort of stuck with us. Some of the ups and downs of scheduling and everybody where they are, but
the hiatus.
Yeah, we're back at it. We've got some new plans, and hopefully we'll see everybody next week. So thanks again for listening, and like, share, all that stuff that Nick usually says, and subscribe, all that stuff, whatever. We're on iTunes, you know the deal, la-da-da-da-da-da. If you're at this point in the show already, you already know all this. So go for it. Keep listening, and we'll see you next week, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Ciao.